obviously you went with the Coens, who are executive producers. At least they have that credit. I don't know what their input is to you.
Early on, this
Yeah.
this got set up. MGM controlled the rights. They sold it to FX. They didn't have a writer attached. Joel and Ethan signed on. They said, if we like the script, you can put our name on it. If not, you know where to send the checks. And luckily
Yeah.
they really liked that first script that I wrote. Every once in a while, I'll go to New York and I'll sit down with them and they'll say, "You're still making that thing?" And but they're godfathers and supportive, but also not trying to tell me how to do it.
So what if I do gotta screw loose? Stressing the like? I'm holding up my end of the deal. We're man and wife, him and me, and he loves me.
There are ways we could change that. The holy bond, revocation of the trust. And cut you both out of the will, see if that moves the marker.
What are you saying?
I'm saying I don't trust you. You're up to something, and I won't have you dragging my son down. So, best you make excuses, you go back to wherever it is you were before you met. If you go easy, I could even see my way to staking you for the first 2 years.
Listen, bitch. I've climbed through 6 kinds of hell to get where I am. And no Ivy League royal wannabe is gonna run me off just because she doesn't like the way I smell. If you want to tussle with me, you better sleep with both eyes open. Because nobody takes what's mine and lives.
Welcome to Behind the Lens. Well, okay, so he is a novelist, written 6 novels, a filmmaker, creator, showrunner, writer, director, producer, Emmy, WGA, Peabody winner, and many others, and now season 5 of Fargo, which premiered all the way back in November, but people are still watching it. This is Noah Hawley. Welcome to
Thank
Behind
you.
the Lens.
It
Yeah.
seems like too much, right? Too many things to have to read
I
out
would
loud.
just after 6 novels.
I know. I'm tired. I probably look how I feel.
So, did you start as a novelist? Did you start as a?
I did.
That was it.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to be a rock star, and then it turned out I wasn't a night person, and I thought, what can I do creatively during the day? And my mother was a writer, her mother was a writer, so I come from a long line of writers, and I started writing fiction in my 20s, and sold my first book. I was 27 or something, and then my motto's, what else can I get away with? And so I ended up writing my first book got optioned. I wrote a original screenplay. It just started a journey.
That's wild. Have any of them actually been turned into films yet?
They haven't yet, no. And now, of course, it's up to me. It doesn't make sense for anyone else to do it, but there is, and so it's there. I think about it. I have a Before the Fall set up at Sony, and I'm talking to them about a film, and so I'll get to them eventually. But I have all these news stories that keep coming to mind, so I'm just doing that.
Exactly. Well, with other people's films.
Yes,
actually.
I know, it's weird, right? I mean, I've sort of built this career as reinventing classic films, and from Fargo and now Alien, and I was going to do Star Trek, and it's interesting, and yet somehow have managed to maintain my originality while doing it, and being able to do my own thing under the auspices of making a Coen Brothers movie or a Ridley Scott movie.
We haven't seen the Ridley Scott one
Not yet. I am almost done with it.
Are you?
Yeah.
Okay, because it got delayed, and
everything got delayed last year, right? So we've got another month or so of shooting, and then you got to do all the finish work you got to do. But I'm very excited about it.
You've been doing this for 10 years now, and you're still making that thing.
I know, I'm still making that thing. Yeah, every time I wrap it up, I go, well, that's got to be it, right? And then 6 months, a year, 18 months later, I'll wake up and I'll go, oh yeah, you could do that. There'll be an idea that'll come, it'll start. But there's so many elements, ideas, themes that go into a Fargo, that it takes time to, to add it up. It's going to be about debt. Okay, great. It's going to be a kind of game of telephone with the movie. Okay, so, and we're going to explore the idea of, well, what is a wife, right? In the movie, the wife gets kidnapped. She's whisking, there's a bag over her head, she's dead. But in ours, it's like, well, so what if it was the wife is the story? And then exploring.
And what if she wasn't the wife?
Right. And what if she was more than one wife, and the idea of debt and what do we owe? And so there's just a lot that goes into it.
You're talking about season 5 here, the one that the most current it veers, I think, from your previous seasons. And I can see why you still are interested in this format.
Yeah.
Because it's allowing you, not as a television series, but it's almost something new. It's an anthology, but you're taking it, we're seeing bits and pieces here, and what if that is, we're seeing Fargo 1, the movie, and we're not.
Well, it's cumulative in a way. I mean, I like that you could watch it in any order, from year to year, and even throw the movie in there. You know what I mean? Like, you can watch it in any order, and sometimes there are connections from one thing to another, and sometimes it's just a thematic connection. And I would hope at the end of it, there's sort of a sense that we've engaged with this great American experiment, and really wrestling with this idea of like decency versus cynicism, and how do we stay good and fight evil at the same time.
I thought that was so interesting theme-wise of this season, because this country has gone to a dark place, darker than it's ever been. But you're doing a show that is as dark as it's ever been, but has humor. But what it has is optimism.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think if you look at where we ended season 3, for example, which was in 2016, we ended with a question. Like, the door was going to open, and either the good news was going to enter, or the bad news was going to enter, and then we cut, right? And it was sort of up to the audience to decide, is the future going to be good or bad? But here I really, we start with this definition of Minnesota nice, which is this concept that Joel and Ethan coined for the movie. And then, of course, we immediately show you that Minnesota nice doesn't really exist, because we're at this melee at the school board meeting, and it really is, what is civil society anymore if we've stopped pretending in order to get along and we're just going to be at each other's throats? How do we get past that? Are we just going to Hatfield and McCoy this thing for the rest of our lives, or are we going to come to some kind of like truth and reconciliation?
Yeah, it's the America that we never thought we'd see.
Yeah, yeah, and where everything is said out loud, and I always say that you can judge the moral spectrum in Fargo by who is selfish. Who's the most selfish person is usually the person who's saying, I'm the victim here.
Right.
Right? And then there are people who think about other people, and they're usually the ones who are the heroes, because that's kind of how the world works. If you're just in it for yourself, how is that a society?
Do you think of Trump a lot when you're doing this? Because John Hamm's character is a very interesting one. He's complex as he can be, but he's also somebody that's a complete narcissist.
I try to engage with these issues in a way that isn't political, if that's possible.
Yeah.
Right? And I live in the middle of the country. I live in Austin, and I want to tell stories to everyone. And, in creating Roy's character, I didn't want to make a mockery, right? And I was aware as I was doing it that for some portion of the country, Roy is the protagonist of the show.
Exactly.
Right? And we have to sort of present him as he is, and then let his actions inform. Are you still rooting for him? It's the Walter White thing. Are you still with him?
Yeah.
He's going to do that thing. Now he's beating her. Like, still he's your guy,
He can shoot somebody in the neck. You can watch it and then watch him justify it.
But he's charming, and but the thing is, this isn't the moral majority that we remember from our youth, right? This is Tiger King America. This is weird sort of hedonistic morality, right? Where in order to maintain the moral high ground, they've had to redefine what morality is to include their behavior, right? And so that's the thing. I mean, one of my favorite moments of the whole season is Jennifer Jason Leigh saying, so you want you want no responsibility and all the freedom. You're fighting for your right to be a baby.
Yeah.
You know, that's only babies have
That's
that.
it. Although
Yeah.
she loves the Federalist Society.
Yeah,
but,
you know.
whatever.
But one of the things, I mean, you know, if you look at a political lens that I tried to do in this season is basically to say, well, what if they're all Republicans? Right?
That I thought was interesting
Yeah.
because they're really, if you're an MSNBC rabid fan,
Yeah.
there's nobody there for you.
No, I mean, you could argue that even, you know, Lamorne's character or Rich's character were like, look, we're not touchy-feely progressive. We
Right.
believe in law and order. We believe in
Yeah.
these things. And even Dot and her husband, they might be like, well, you know, we're maybe socially conservative, fiscally conservative, you know, but that party used to include all shades, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, I thought that was an interesting place to have the conversation.
It's very interesting. You know,
Yeah.
there's so much in this, which I love about it is you've managed to do this series and find so many new things. So it's always new. And I think that's what attracts the kind of cast that you can get. John Hamm, we have never seen John Hamm, at least I
Yeah.
can't recall, play this kind of a role.
No, I mean, I've seen him play villains, and I think he's great doing it. And obviously his most iconic role, you know, you weren't sure, is he a
Right.
good guy or a bad guy? And I think that John can really hold that duality really well. And, you know, I mean, I've known him for a while, and I said, you know, I really want you to do this. I said, it's not Handsome on a Horse, though. That's not what we're doing, right? This is a character role, and you have to go all the way. And he did, you know. He bulked up a bit. He became, you know, American in a more Midwestern way.
Despite the nipple rings. that he
Yeah,
wears.
and then you know, the voice and the gruffness and you know, he went to a very dark place for this role.
And he's so good
Yeah.
in it, you know. I mean,
Yeah.
he has another moment for
Yeah.
him, too, because Morning Show is completely
Right.
different, and he's really good in
And
that.
he shot them at the same time. He would get on a
really?
plane from Calgary and fly to LA or New York and make the morning show, and
Oh,
then
wow.
get back on a plane and come to us. So talk about putting on a different hat.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And Juno Temple is just extraordinary in this, too. You
Yeah.
know, right from the first episode where you're watching her and, you know, you're just going like, oh, my God, what's going to happen here?
Yeah, I mean, my feeling was if you cast this wrong, you're calling Child Protective Services, right? Because here's this woman, and you know, she's living in this denial. This thing happens to her. She escapes a kidnapping. She goes home. She pretends it never happened. They come for her again. She allows that to happen while her kids are in the house. But you know, I needed someone who was fun and mischievous and playful and a fun mom, and you know, Juno just brought those elements to it, where no matter how bad things got, like she stayed positive, she stayed constructive.
She's an amazing character, and fighting old Munch here,
Yeah.
you know, and he's amazing.
Sam Spruill, yeah.
You know, and you're watching his hairstyle, and I kept
Yeah.
thinking of Javier Bardem in
I
No
know.
Country for Old Men.
I know. I say, God bless Sam for letting us do that to his head. And you know, at least when he wasn't on set, he could brush it back. But
yeah, but you can't not kill this guy off.
no, and he, you know, you know, these roles like David Thewlis's role or Bokeem Woodbine in season 2, this real act of invention, right? Where on some level you're playing a real person, and on some level you're sort of playing this elemental figure.
Yeah.
Thewlis was this Faustian Willy Loman, right? And,
Right.
and you know, and for Sam to be this eternal figure, this, you know, 500-year-old man.
Yeah, hasn't
you know,
talked to anybody in a century.
yeah, who owns nothing. If he wants a cigarette, he's got to find it on the ground. You know, we had all these rules for him, and you know, the idea that he's sold his soul, and so there's no me, there's left. He never says I or me, and
Right.
you know, Sam went all the way,
He really does.
You know, and he becomes in the end, you know, he's on some level the scariest figure who becomes the most heartbreaking.
Yeah, and you end it with him.
Yeah.
I'm always interested in what's the last image
Yes.
in a movie, and you know,
Yes.
that and
I know. And there was a moment where there was a suggestion, I won't say from who at the network, that maybe we want to end on Juno's reaction to his smile. And
that
you're
would be
like,
the normal.
That's a terrible idea. You want to end right here on the feeling, right? And you know, luckily I have Final Cut.
That you did, yeah. But sometimes that's like an ego thing with the star, you know.
Right.
You got to end on the
Yeah.
star's face.
Well, what I found is, as someone who's an ensemble storyteller, is that you tend to weed out the egotists because everyone's showing up knowing that there's six stars of the show, and so I've been lucky. I haven't had the real diva experience yet, and I also think that now that Fargo is what it is, people show up and even they're a little intimidated. Even Ewan McGregor's a little, it's like, Chris Rock. He's like,
they don't want to be the ones that said,
remember,
"Oh, they killed it."
I remember working with Chris, and I was like, "What's up?" He's like, "There's a rhythm to the dialogue in Fargo, and I can hear him." I'm like, "Don't think about that. Like, just be the guy in the moment."
And he was great.
Yes.
I mean, you have amazing cast throughout this entire series.
Yeah.
And you direct the first 2 episodes here.
Yes.
You write them all.
Yes.
But you direct just the first 2. Is that to set a template, or what is your reasoning on just doing the first 2?
Well, children, family. I want them to like me and remember me. I do. The first year I wrote them all solo. I've had writers' rooms ever since, and I'll write and co-write. I always start it off because every year it's a new movie, right? It's new world building, and I found, like, if I can remove all the layers between the vision and the screen, then I can get exactly what I see on the screen. And so it just became the way to do it. And now, of course, with Alien and Legion or whatever, it's like that's the template is to get in there and create the world, create the rules cinematically. How are we shooting this? How's the camera going to move? What's the aesthetic? And then hand it off to other directors, because that's how television works.
Yeah.
Normally,
yeah.
And I think it has to. And I talked to Sam Esmail about it, or and he's like, I got kids now. Like, it's not sustainable.
Yeah.
Leslie Linka Glotter, I had a dinner with her. She's doing all 6 hours of this De Niro thing, and she's on day 45 of 120. It's like, who can sustain that? Television works the way it works for a reason.
Yeah. And your direction is not typical television. There's a lot of silence in the first episode. There's not a lot of dialogue. We're watching the camera move in such interesting ways. It's almost Hitchcockian.
Yeah.
You have the role of yarn you're playing with, which I thought was really a clever device. But the camera is so important here of what you're doing all throughout.
Yeah, and look, I have no formal training, right? So I just make it up as I go along, and it's all about trying to create a feeling in the audience. And everything from lens choice. I'll do theatrical lighting cues. We do things like when she's kidnapped. If you notice, when she's fighting the guys off upstairs, the wallpaper is this jungle scene. She's out in nature, and when she's captured, she's down in the kitchen, and it's bars. It's stripes, right?
Yeah.
So is the audience noticing that she's gone from freedom to jail? They're probably not, but there's a feeling, right? You're feeling it. And then if you notice, she fades away. We don't cut, she fades away, and you're left with just the bars. And that was just me on the day looking at it and going, oh, so we're locked off, and if we pull her out, and then we can just do that. It's all about trying to create a feeling.
And you do it within the confines of television having commercial breaks on FX, but not on Hulu. So if you watch it on Hulu, the breaks are there, and it has a different kind of feel, but you've written for that.
Well, so I don't write act breaks. I write it seamlessly, and then we'll figure it out in the edit, because I also don't believe that if the last thing the audience sees isn't maximum drama, they're going to turn the channel, right? Like, you either have them or you don't.
Yeah.
But then I also get FX to do a seamless version, which I suppose is for iTunes or buying it, where there are no breaks in it.
That's good,
And I just think that people watch it in so many different ways, and we need to finish it for each of those different ways.
I wanted to ask, we're doing an event coming up, Sound and Screen. It's all about music, and a lot of people don't think about the music in television, but I noticed in the first episode, it's so important.
Yeah.
The way you use music. How do you approach that?
Well, every year, I've worked with Jeff Russo, my composer, at the script stage or even the outline stage. What does this year sound like, right? What are the elements to it? I always put together a playlist, which is both, which is needle drop songs, classical music, whatever things that feel like they're filling the sonic, the sound of the show, the state of mind of it, and then we talk about the characters, and he'll write themes for each of the characters, and sometimes those themes will be applied in the finished cut to those characters, or sometimes they're used in other ways. But you know, we were one of the first shows to really sort of bring the full orchestra back
Right.
to television and use the scale of it and the drama. And you know, I think my days as a musician, I think I have a very good sense of how to use music, right? And often the answer is don't use
Right.
music, and especially if the tone is you're doing drama, you're doing comedy, you're doing violence, which do you score? Because if you score the comedy, it undermines the drama, etc. So often it's don't score. You know, where do you put the music is just as important as what the music is.
Yeah, I've really noticed not the use of music in things. Coming back from the Cannes Film Festival and watching these films from all over the world, the directors who don't use music at all, and then suddenly at the end there's music, and I go, oh, there was no music in this film.
Well, music tells you how to feel, right?
Yeah.
And that's why, you know, in the old days of broadcast television, it's like the sad piano music starts before the sad moment. They don't even wait for the sad moment, right? But if you don't tell people how to feel, then they're on their own, right? And then, you know, the example that I would give quickly is in season 3, Carrie Coon has this thing where the door sensors don't recognize her, you know, the sync, like she's beginning to think that she's not real, right? And she's at her lowest point. She has the scene with her coworker and she's saying all this stuff, and it's so emotional. And there was plenty of places I could have played music, right? And I didn't. And then she goes to the bathroom, and because she's owned up to it, now the sync works for her, and that's where the score went, right?
Yeah.
It was the uplifting moment, and I think because I hadn't used music before, it's so much more powerful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so important in things. I have to ask you, we talked a little bit about Alien, but everybody's waiting for this. You know, this is another roll of the dice to get those fans who love what Alien, the first 2 Aliens are just beyond brilliant.
They
Cameron's
are.
version
Yes,
and
and Ridley,
Scott.
yeah.
How closely do you work with somebody like Ridley Scott in this?
Well, I just try to keep up with Ridley Scott. I mean, the guy, I mean, every time I would talk to him, he's storyboarding his next thing, or he's in France at his vineyard or whatever. I mean, I think it's taken me 5 years to get this show off the ground and into theaters. I think he's made 9 movies in that period of time, including Napoleon and Gladiator 2 and everything. So, you know, I don't spend a lot of time with Ridley. I have, you know, like with Joel and Ethan, I have his buy-in. I said to him, look, I'm adapting your film. That's what I'm doing. I think the aesthetic of it, the sensibility, the retro futurism, like, you know, that's what inspires me, you know. And of course, James Cameron's movie, one of the great action movies of all time, and I feel like those elements are available to me as well. And then, you know, I mean, I'm doing my own thing with it. You know, just like I've heard Denis Villeneuve say, like, he couldn't have made Dune unless he'd made every other movie.
Oh, yeah.
Right? To get him there, each one slightly bigger.
Yeah.
I would say a similar thing, which is, you know, it took making all these things, scaling up, making Legion, making Fargo, Lucy, all those things to get to
Lucy in the
this place.
Sky, which was your theatrical film.
Yeah, and you know, the sort of experimental phase of Legion going into Lucy and the magic realism astronaut movie that I made, and then, you know, I think you see with this year of Fargo, like, I'm a great story well told. That's what I'm doing. It starts with a bang. Every episode is 42 to 44 minutes. Like, we're not messing around. It's not indulgent. You know, I think audiences are watching differently now than they did even 3 years ago or 4 years ago. And you know, I want to bring people the horror and the action and the thematic elements that are in those 2 movies. And then, you know, I also have things I want to talk about.
Yeah, and it's set like in a different time period. It's a prequel, I guess. So.
Well, it's set within the time first, second movie in there. So those elements, the Whale and Yutani, all that stuff exists in this world, and it plays with some of those themes, the, you know, blue collar, you know, corporate power, all of that. And it brings these elements to Earth, and it's amazing after 6 films how little mythology there is, right?
Yeah.
You know that there's a whale in Yutani. You don't know how Earth is politically. Are we unified? Or none of that stuff is there, which gives me a lot of leeway to sort of explore what I wanted to explore.
And not go with so much of the technology that's appeared towards the end of the other things.
It's just a choice, right?
Yeah.
And when I think about Alien, I think about the green ASCII. I
Right.
think about those keyboards.
yeah.
I mean that's what
Well, I
Alien
think about
is
the
to
thing
me.
popping out of John Hurt's stomach.
Yeah, well, yeah, yeah. And
That's one of the scariest things I've ever seen.
I mean, we got to do that too. And of course, they, the actors didn't know that was going to happen. They knew that something was going to happen, but they weren't prepared. Their reaction to that blood hitting them in the face, they were not prepared for that.
I talked about taking on your novels and things. Maybe you'll do another theatrical motion picture. Are you looking to do another one?
Yeah, I'd like to. It's interesting working with stories of different lengths, right? I mean, there's something about a limited series. It's a very compelling format, right? Because it's not a 2-hour story and it's not a series. It's we're not allowed to say 10-hour movie anymore, but on some level it is, because it has a beginning, middle, and an end. But when I did Lucy and wrestling with that finite object, right? You can't do that thing that you do in TV where you're like, well, this doesn't really fit here, but I'm going to use it later. There's no later.
No.
Right? And you've shot what you've shot, and unless you're in the big tentpole movies, you're not going back to get pickups or any of that. And so, I think that there's a reason that that film is a real movie star. That you want to be with one smaller number of characters, to really live and here and I'm excited to do another one.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us on Behind the Lens, Noah Hawley. And if you haven't seen it yet, all 10 episodes are on Hulu, streaming now. It's Fargo Season 5. Thanks for joining us on Behind the Lens.
Thanks so much.